trouble here, doesn't it? I don't know why that is.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, everybody.
Hello.
We are here. We are back.
Let's see how long it takes for someone.
What was that you were talking about? Check out my new album ranking for Judas Priest. All right, okay. Uploaded just a couple of hours ago. Could do.
That was a pretty good ranking, actually. I thought you didn't follow it.
I really love doing. Noise is so bad. I really love doing album rankings, but when it comes to something like Judas Priest or Iron Maiden, because our discographies are so big, it's quite an undertaking. Like,
Daniel.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Well, we've got people jumping on nice and early today. This is great. We can get going pretty soon. Right, Gordon?
I think it's not a good start. Live stream. My signal is all over the place.
I literally can't hear anything.
Oh.
It's just
that is really
ever the professional.
Oh no,
Scott! It looks like it's you and me today.
Is that it? Is it? Oh no, Mike's just a statue.
I don't know.
No, I don't.
Figured it out.
They reckon it's me.
I can't even point to him. Why can't I point to him?
It's Mark G with a Rice Krispie.
Yeah. You see, everybody, if I mute Mark, there we go.
Yeah, we'll have to definitely strategically mute Mark, I think.
Mark, do you know sign language? Because that would help immensely in this situation. Right. Okay, we've got a good number of people joining already. We've got 11 on. Peter's just joined again. I know we always like to wait for Peter to join before we get in. So how's everyone doing this week? Good?
Yeah. Hot.
Back at work and sunburnt. That's one of the reasons I kind of staved off from doing a video, because the first couple of days back at work, I was just like a beetroot. I was burnt and just unhappy. So, but for a ginger, I'm not getting a bad tan now. So,
like I said, the camera takes away your tan and it takes away all your muscle definition and adds pounds or so.
But saying that, like, I could get a tan in winter, so I'm that fair.
Right. So, should we get our guest out?
Yes, the illustrious.
Yeah. So joining us tonight in contact with, we've got ClarkOVision, Bev. So she's waiting patiently in the green room, socially distanced green room. She had to sort out her own drinks and snacks for tonight, but here we go. Hey, Bev.
Hey!
Hello, everybody. Hi. Nice
Welcome
to be on here.
How are you doing, Bev?
I'm all right, actually. I'm not too bad. I'm actually starting my work on Monday for the first time since March.
That'll be a sore one when that alarm goes off.
I'll have forgotten what to do. So, yeah, I'm quite looking forward to be honest. So back to normal a bit more. But in the meantime, I'm very happy to be a guest on your show. Thank you for asking me.
Very welcome.
No problem. We've got some stuff to find out about you, Bev. So we thought, what's the best way to do it? To do it in front of our tens of viewers.
There's so many. I can see the chat actually because I'm on the PC, I guess. So I can see all the folks' comments. Hello, everybody.
That's great, actually, Bev. So because usually because the guys on the phone don't get to see the comments, and it's normally me putting them up. So if I miss one, which is in the past, see something and you can you want to answer them or speak in, feel free just to speak up and we'll kind of make this episode go along the way.
This is just
What is
See
everyone
if I'm
doing?
working or not.
Okay. Hello, Gordon.
Everyone okay?
I should
Everyone
really
good to
do.
go?
I'm not used to the metal horns actually. So.
Let's go
Yeah.
through it because even when we had
Yeah.
Darcy on, Darcy wasn't as popular with people saying hello to him. So this is a great start already, Bev. You know, obviously people are very happy to see you here. So
You're already ahead of Darcy. So let's get into it.
Right, come on, let's go on questions.
Right, so I think where we should start is at the start. So when it comes to metal, hard rock and stuff, where did it all start for you?
I would probably say it started about 1987, 88 is when I started noticing the hard rock and metal properly, and it was definitely Hysteria. What happened to Mark? Europe with Out of This World, that was around that time. Bon Jovi, Slippery When Wet. These kind of, albums, they were kind of like the first bands I started paying attention to. There was Van Halen, who had a couple of hits going about at that point as well. Although for me, I never took to Van Halen completely for some reason. There was one or two songs I liked. I don't know why. And so that was when it all started for me, round about then in the late 80s. So the glam metal was happening. And then Guns N' Roses, I think, came along in, were they 88 or 89? I can't remember. Or 87.
I think they were 87, I think.
87. Yeah. So that, there was they came out as well with a slightly different sound, and they had some, well, you know what Appetite for Destruction is like. It's just that, just a bit of a different sound to everything else around it at that time. Sweet Child of Mine had epic solo, Paradise City. They all got into the UK national charts, So
yeah,
it was kind of amazing for Britain, really, because that sort of thing doesn't really hit the mainstream too easily over the years, But so, and definitely Leppard became my favourite band at the time. I really loved them. So we've lost more people now. So
that's the effect you have on them, Bev.
Yeah.
So when it came to, is it Hysteria was the first Def Leppard
that
album?
was the first one I heard of them was their fourth album.
So did you then go back straight away?
That was it. After I got Hysteria on vinyl, it was the first album I ever got by a rock band, by an actual band. I think my dad bought me it because I'd be about 10 years old at the time. So got that, and then I started checking out their earlier stuff, Pyromania, High and Dry. I kind of did it in reverse order, and finally On Through the Night, which was their debut. And each of these albums all sounded really different to each other, because there was a thing with Def Leppard. There was a progression as to how they developed musically, I think, and sonically as well, because they had the influence of the producer Mutt Lange on board from the second one. So for High and Dry, it was very AC/DC sounding in places, the tones of the guitars. Then Pyromania brought in the kind of pop element, and then Hysteria was a bit of a crossover and orchestration kind of thing, blending in, and and you can sort of tell the difference. But I like each album for what it is. But yeah, and then that was it.
So who would you say your favourite member is?
Oh, well, come on. Listen, my name will give a clue. It was Steve Clark. He was the one for me. He just kind of clicked with me. Initially, Joe Elliott, the singer, he was like my favourite at the time. And I remember thinking it was a toss-up between Joe Elliott and John Bon Jovi for favourite guys, and but Steve Clark kind of came up for the background, if you like, once I kind of started watching more videos, reading magazines about them and stuff, and just seeing pictures of them and stuff. And I thought, yeah, he's pretty cool. You know, he looked the part. He just had a kind of a swagger about him that was really kind of cool. The low slung guitar and everything. And I later learned he was the one who was the driving force behind the music. Really, he was actually the main songwriter. And so I thought, well, that just is even cooler, you know, from that sort of thing. But
yeah,
and he became my idol, sort of thing, you know. Oh, they're back! Look.
So we actually have a full house and with no clicking.
Hello, Bev. There's Bev.
You've
What's going
moved, aye. He's moved. He's on the way.
You've got up in priority now, Bev. You see, it's the other two have got to earn their rankings back up here again after
Yeah.
drop.
They've got to really up their game now.
I'll be down here forever then.
Yeah.
So your cracker has gone, Mark. It must be all those CDs that causing all that laser action causing.
It's all that metal, all the metal. It's like it must be like a lead box. Like it must be like a steel coffin, Bev.
Well, it must be.
Well, for what you guys have missed,
I am now sat about 2 inches away from the main internet hub. So it was obviously my little box room must be out of bounds. I don't know, but there you go.
Anyway, carry on, Bev, because you were halfway through the story there.
Yeah, I was just kind of. I was asked by Scott there about my beginnings of Def Leppard and how I started with Hysteria and went backwards with the albums, and then discovered that each of the albums had a different sound, and how Steve Clark became my favourite member of the band. When I think about it, I don't know 100% how he became my favourite. He just did, I guess. I don't know what it was exactly, but he just seemed to be the icon for me, the standout member of the band. And even he didn't do interviews very often. He was kind of like a shy person, actually. But when he did do interviews, they were so fascinating to me because he would talk about the music, he'd talk about guitars, guitar spec, things to do with music that I didn't really understand, but it just sounded interesting to me. And he just kind of sounded intelligent as well in an interview, which was kind of refreshing in a way as well, because a lot of the bands would just waffle on a load of nonsense, to be honest, and Kerrang and Metal Hammer when you read about them. He was actually saying something about the music or guitars and things, and that's what I kind of found interesting about him as well. So.
Well, I think people are drawn to that because if you take, I know exactly where you're coming from because you've got the level of who's the like when you're I suppose when you're back in the day, if you look at girl bands or boy bands, you're like who's the best looking or who's this, but then you get into when you get finally into the proper music, you kind of gravitate towards the people in the band that are like the driving force behind the music. So, for example, like you'd look at Iron Maiden and people would be like, "Oh, Bruce Dickinson," but when they really get into the music, they go, "No, Steve Harris." I want to know what Steve Harris is saying because he's got the knowledge behind what their output is.
Mm-hmm. Right. He's one of the Night Raging Smith put out a lot as well. I think I would say probably Smith was next in line to Harris's Sparrow fighting. I could be wrong with that, but he seems to be quite in there as well. But yeah, I think Steve was underrated as well, actually. Totally underrated. But then I don't think, sorry, just for getting back to Steve there, I don't think he got the credit he really deserved because of the band he was in and because of the commercial explosion, if you like, with him. And the Americans took to Def Leppard like they were the new pin-up boy band, you know, like Bros or Nuka, whoever it was in America at that time. Def Leppard were almost viewed in that vein because they kind of had the looks as well as the music, if you like. Because I did think Steve was pretty good looking as well, I have to confess. But that wasn't all of it. But yeah, I think because he stuck with the band. They exploded and they topped all the charts and sold out, as some of the hardcore fans from like 1980 would say. And I think, because of that, he wasn't really considered seriously in the same vein as the likes of maybe Vandy Rhodes or, guys like that. There's other Slash or whoever you may want to pick as your icon sort of thing. But still, he was totally up there as far as music was, as far as I'm. Yeah.
Do you have a fan club, Bev, on Facebook?
Sorry?
Do you have a fan page on Facebook for Steve Clark?
I used to have one. I used to actually have a website, Steve Clark Guitar it was called. And it ran, believe it or not, from, oh God, let me get this right, 2004. And I closed it down just in December last year because I just had enough of the stress and strain of running a website, monitoring things, adding new content, and I had the Facebook page to go with it. I had a Twitter feed for it as well. And just monitoring all that by yourself. I know I could have got moderators to help out as well if I wanted in the Facebook groups, but I didn't want people to, I don't know what I'm trying to say here. I just wanted it to be specifically as a tribute for Steve only, and I didn't want other people to be able to let in other members of the band kind of thing. This was strictly for Steve. You want a Def Leppard page, go to the Def Leppard page. Kind of
yeah, it started to shift focus in the band.
For the time that you ran that, Bev, how did you find actually finding new material and new information to keep the site updated?
Well, that's the other thing. When the person's dead, it's hard to get new information, if you like. So I used to scour places like eBay for old magazines. I would scour places like eBay, old magazines from around the world. Obviously, if they were in German or French, it was kind of hopeless to try and read them. I did one time get a magazine from Japan. They have a magazine called Young Guitar, and it is the best guitar magazine on the planet, I would have to say. It's so detailed, it's unreal. And I actually paid to get a professional translation of the article because it was all about Steve's gear, his guitars, his spec, his setup, and all that other guitars. And this is what I wanted to put on the website, so, and it cost, I don't know, about £300 to get about 2.5 pages translated. So I did that, and I put these things all up. So I had loads of content. There was quite a lot of content, but to keep adding new stuff latterly, it was getting hard, and I just kind of thought, are people losing interest? There was loads of people had visited. Are people losing interest? Can I be bothered anymore? It's been out there for, 15 plus years. I've done my bit. I did the tribute I wanted to give them. And I just I decided I would just pull it.
Kind of done enough.
Do you think
I've done my bit. So.
Do you think you might resurrect it one day?
Yeah.
Do you think you might resurrect it one day? Did you delete it, or is it there and just hidden, or?
It's not. Well, it's not that I could resurrect it. I've saved all the stuff. I've still got the stuff saved on files on my computer database and stuff. So I could. The Facebook page is still there. I've just taken it offline, if you like. It's kind of not live. So the Facebook page is still there, and it has about 55,000 followers, believe it or not. So wow. I thought I was astonished. I was like, one day I hit 10,000 subscribers, and I couldn't believe it then. And it just kept going up a bit. And it kind of stayed around the 50,000 mark. But
I hope you posted on there that you were coming on here tonight.
I don't know. I've got 50,000 viewers.
Not that we're desperate for viewers or anything, but we're a bit desperate for viewers.
Well, I think we've got a few here, haven't we?
Oh, we're doing well. We always do well. We get a good bunch in here, a good regular bunch. It's always great.
Exactly. It's like a wee family. It's good.
Yeah, it is. There's my
So I think I might have sussed out my clicking issue going on. Does that sound good to you now, guys?
All right, yeah. Was it having Mike? Is that something?
I'm not sure. Well, I don't understand why, but my missus likes to always watch it, and she was watching it on the telly, and she's turned it off on the telly to watch it on the phone. So I think it might be a little bit of an interference thing going on there, which I
if in doubt, maybe wife. Great.
So I've just got to make sure my missus doesn't watch this anymore.
But folk are watching the telly in our house as well.
I don't know whether it's just the YouTube app on the. I don't know, and it seems to have solved the problem. I apologise to everybody for my very unprofessional beginning to this live stream. Gordon said it all there. Look, all come back to the Rocky.
I don't know why I keep jumping out either.
So, Bev, one thing I've always wondered is so for me, watching you and learning about your music taste and knowing about Def Leppard, and obviously I'm a little biased because I'm not a big Def Leppard fan.
Yeah.
So Def Leppard is obviously both your favourite band, and at times it sounds like the band that frustrates you and you dislike most in the world at the same time as well. At what point did that pivot? Did it go from being they are everything to they are not going on?
That happened during the 90s. Steve died in 91. And it's just basically been the way I feel. I'm just going to, this is all my own, just in case the band happen to be watching and decide they want to sue me or anything. This is my own personal opinion.
Why? That's great publicity for us.
And over the time,
Bev's opinions are her own and nothing to do with content.
Yeah, nothing to do with us.
Absolutely. And so, yes. I feel that they didn't handle, how shall I say it, the PR, the press and everything. They weren't very respectful in the 90s regarding what Steve had given them in the past to where they got to. First of all, they were promised a memorial date, a memorial show thing, bands do when somebody dies at a later date. And to this day, 30 years later, we're still waiting on that. So that was pretty dismal to start with, because that was in all the press. And in interviews that came through in the 90s, I felt band members were not very nice with certain things they had to say about Steve. And they talked a lot about his personal issues, which obviously everybody wants to know. He had alcohol and drug issues, obviously. Doesn't everybody in that business, more or less? But they weren't very nice about it. And if you compare other bands like Led Zeppelin or Metallica to their past members, they have never really said anything disrespectful in the press. And I was finding this all the way through the 90s. And as it went on, my liking for them just went further down, further down, further down. And then when they kept releasing music as well, I know got Vivian Campbell, and I've absolutely nothing against him whatsoever. He's a great guitarist in himself, and and I personally feel he's wasted in Def Leppard. He doesn't seem to be allowed to, from the way I see it, express himself as freely as he'd like to, or as creatively as he'd like to as a guitarist. But musically, the albums just went. They came out. Slang was an attempt at what was the thing at the time in '95, and that was a big failure. And then they tried to go back to their hysteria kind of style with Euphoria. And by this point, Phil Collins was dealing with all the guitars, and he had a certain sound, and I just didn't like the tone. It was very, I used to describe it, or still describe it, as very robotic, mechanical, processed, over-processed. It doesn't sound like a raw, natural kind of guitar that you would get with the older Def Leppard. The vocals are just so overdubbed and overlayered, it's atrocious. So I just went right off the music, and I just went right off the whole band in general from that point, because basically they tried to downplay Steve's role in the band from what I read in interviews. And there's other people out there who agree with me, because I've discussed it with other Def Leppard fans and stuff like that. But, and it was very, and that was it. And I can't sit here today and say how wonderful Def Leppard are, because they're rubbish. They just live on their 1980s success. Every concert you go to now, they play all the hits of the 80s, which was all primarily written by Steve. Not all, but primarily. And, they hardly play any new stuff. It's kind of...
I think there's a lot of bands like that now, though, which is probably, I don't think it's that surprising. I mean, even some of, maybe with the exception of Iron Maiden, who they do a tour for an album, and they tour that album and then play a few other, and then do another tour just to great hits. But even bands like Anthrax have been doing the same set for 30 years.
Yeah.
They're just living. So,
that is what, well, I know in America, that's apparently the fans still want to hear Pour Some Sugar on Me. I would quite happily never want to hear that song again in my life, but they still want it for some reason.
I suppose it comes down to, as well, you've got to be putting out quality new releases if you're gonna tour an album. I mean, obviously it's the same with Motley Crue. You go to a Motley Crue show, they'll play maybe 2 songs off their new stuff, but then it's all gone back to the 80s stuff. When, if you're a diehard fan, which you're a diehard fan of Def Leppard, obviously, you want to hear those deep cuts. You want to hear the songs that haven't been done before, or it might be a song that's never been played live before, then they've done like maybe a newer version of it. Do you know what I mean? So, I mean, there's only so many concerts you can go to, or so many shows you can watch where it's just the same 16 songs over and over again, but just in a different order.
Aye, exactly.
Well, there's a website which is quite a good website to look at, and it's got. Let me just pull this for some support, as I'm an old man.
What? You've not stopped moving since this whole thing started.
I know. It's a nightmare. It tells you it's got all the Iron Maiden songs listed, and it tells you when they were last played live.
Right.
You wouldn't believe it. And Def Leppard will have something like that, and like some big Iron Maiden songs haven't been played. They've maybe been played twice, in the first fortnight when the album came out, and then never ever again.
Yeah.
It's mind blowing to me that they can put a song out and I mean a big song. I can't remember the name of the song, but it was something like Flight of Icarus, hadn't been played since like 1988 or something live, and I'm thinking, but I'm always fascinated by stuff like that, but you never get it with live shows. I've seen Black Sabbath.
They got a lot.
Paranoid and Symptom of the Universe.
I always wondered if Iron Maiden never played that. Was there some kind of issue about the topic of it, or religious connection? I just wondered why it never seemed to get played. I don't know.
Don't know.
Because I'd love to hear that live. That's a good song. I like that one.
Yeah, there's a few bands that are. I mean, obviously, I'm judging on Motley Crue because they're my favourite band. But but the thing is, you can have too much of a good thing, because I think Maiden, when they go out on a world tour when they're supporting an album, they've really been dropping the ball, in my opinion. So if I was to see Maiden, I would want to see all the old songs. I'd want to see all the stuff from the 80s. I don't want to hear something off the Book of Souls. I'd rather hear a classic.
I would in that case, because Book of Souls, it's just not clicking for me. It's the worst album I think I've done in a long time as well. So
that album was the first time I saw them live, and I loved the stuff off that. I mean, I think that album is really underrated. I think it's too long. A lot of people want to hear Maiden do the 80s stuff, and I did. I mean, there were some of the classics on there that I melted when I heard them, like the Trooper and Iron Maiden. But I think the Book of Souls is a good album. When I heard them live, it sounded a lot better than when I heard that live Book of Souls album, which probably is one of their worst live albums I thought they put out. But I didn't mind it that they were touring an album. I think in hindsight, I probably would have preferred to see them do the greatest hits. But yeah, it was just a great experience to see them, and they're just awesome live.
But don't they alternate though between they do a tour supporting the new album and then they do a greatest hits tour the year after or 2 years after?
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do alternate between the two. But
well,
I mean,
I would have loved to have been on that, seen that. That was 2008. It seems ages ago now, but that would have been the absolute brilliant tour for me. Somewhere back in time.
Sorry, I'm going to say a shameless plug. Mark Down Under says, after Brave New World, I lost interest. I've got a video coming up where I'm going to talk about how to get into Maiden in the 21st century.
Interesting.
it's a tough one.
Thanks, Nathan. That was a great link.
Because Brave New World was on the turn of the century, wasn't it? It was about year 2000 or something.
And the thing is, I think, you know what it is with Maiden as well? They've got such a hardcore fan base that it's like they don't want to accept that they're subpar.
Fans can
I mean, Dance with Death. All right, fair enough. I quite like A Matter of Life and Death, and The Final Frontier. They go on like, but there's great songs. It's like they kid themselves. I mean, I'm a big Iron Maiden fan, but I know when to say that's not a good album. You know what I mean?
To be honest, there's only the Book of Souls that I can't take to now out of the new stuff. I thoroughly enjoy it all now. It's took me a while, man. It took me quite a while to get it on.
It's funny hearing you say that, because Book of Souls is the only, I think, my favourite Maiden album since Seventh Son. I just took to Book of Souls straight away. Yeah, really.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
it really has.
I suppose growing up, I wasn't always the biggest fan of that sort of traditional heavy metal. I'd gone off on this heavier journey, so Seventh Son was a massive album around, so you couldn't avoid it, and I always enjoyed that. But anything that came after that, I always enjoyed it. But Book of Souls is the first sort of album that really sort of piqued my interest again. And I think it's that age-old thing, how something affects you personally. It doesn't always have to be the best. It's like that Malaya Rage album I was talking about. It's not as good as the second album, but for me, it's a better album, I suppose, because it's got more of a personal sort of thing. And Book of Souls was the first Maiden sort of release that drew me right back in. I thought, you know what, I really like that. I was kind of on the fence. I've always liked Maiden, but they didn't ever do anything special for me until Book of Souls.
See, I was the opposite. I wasn't the opposite. I really got into Book of Souls because I'm lucky the guy I work with were into the exact same type of music, and he actually got the album before me. So it was straight on in the truck, driving around, listening to it, and I thought, this is really good. And after that, it just died off for me. The more I listened to it, the more I thought, you know what, I actually don't like this as much as I thought I did.
What about the power metal, Bev? Because that's another thing. If it's not Def Leppard on your channel or sort of the traditional stuff,
it's the
power metal on there, aren't you?
Yeah, and that's more of a new thing to be honest for me. When I got back into music, which was thanks to Iron Maiden and A Matter of Life and Death, that kind of piqued my interest in music again. And I think it was really a boy in Mallock that took a season in metal stuff as well. And he says to me, have you ever heard of the band Sabaton? And at this point, it was no, I didn't know them. And he said, well, you should check them out. It sounds like them. And Sabaton were kind of the first one that picked it off from me regarding the power metal side of things, from a modern point of view. Because although I like Halloween, back in the 80s, I didn't really take much notice of Halloween because I thought they were too. This is me just thinking as a 10, 11, 12-year-old. I thought they sounded too heavy and they were maybe more closer to thrash in the speed factor. And at that time, for me, it just sounded too much, so I kind of didn't lean towards Halloween at the time. So basically, they came, I was late to the party on Halloween as well, but Halloween, absolute classic in that type of area, and then so it was Sabaton, and then from there I started just discovering on places like YouTube. There was, when you try to think of bands that are in your collection, you just can't. Hammerfall, that was another one I tried, and I just loved it. And I think it was just the big uplifting, guitar melodies and the big choruses and the sing-along kind of feel-good kind of sound that comes from all these power metal. And then some of the topics, the fantasy topics, you can't obviously take these kind of lyrics seriously. If you want to sing about dragons and wizards and things. But yeah, so I think that, as I say, that came later for me, but now I just, anything power metal, I'm interested to hear it. I might not like every single one. For example, Primal Fear. I know Darcy's suggested that I would really like that band, and I sampled a couple of the tracks and off of various albums, and something about it just didn't take. And then they've just released, the latest one's just dropped. What the heck is it called?
Metal Commandos or something like that.
Metal Commandos, yes. So this is the first one of theirs. There we are. This is the first one of theirs that I have just bought because I sampled 3 of their songs on YouTube and I liked all 3. And I don't know what was different about this one to the previous ones, as I know Ralph Sheepers is the main man who sings and everything, and he was in Gamma Ray. But that one seems to have clicked for me, so I'm glad, and I'm hoping that means I can go back and some of the others I'll get into. But there's just good stuff.
Don't say the word click. Mark's gone now.
Was it Ralph Peters? Yeah. In Gamma Ray, and then maybe Darcy will jump in if he's still watching. But didn't he leave Gamma Ray to go to audition?
Priest. That's right.
Gig, and then he started at Primal Fear.
I think that's how it happened. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, and you can sort of. Sorry, I was just going to say you can sort of see why he's maybe picked as one of the candidates for Judas Priest, because he has got a voice that can soar.
Oh, yeah, soaring.
But obviously that didn't happen for him. So
I totally get the Sabaton thing. I mean, when I first heard Sabaton, and I actually jumped in around, I think it was Carolus Rex, and I was thinking these guys are awesome. And like you say, it was that heavy metal, but it's like that uplifting kind of epic feel. It's like very, very full sounding metal. And I think the thing with Sabaton is obviously it's the war thing that can put a lot of folk off. And to be fair, that's not really my thing either. But the way it comes across from them, it's really, really good. And they're all very, very talented as well. So
yeah, they must be.
And obviously, I've seen them live once, and they were absolutely phenomenal. That was on the back of The Last Stand, and they were absolutely brilliant. Like, yeah, they're funny as well. Like during their live shows, like in between the the lead singer brought the keyboard out, because he actually used to play the keyboard for Sabaton, and he brought the keyboard out, and then he suddenly just starts going into Van Halen and Jump, starts going and like everyone's pissed themselves laughing, and it's just they're just, I think, a really good band, and they're one of those power metal bands as well that's really kind of up their game, and they've kind of gone, you know, they're kind of surpassed the other power metal bands that are around. They're now playing arenas, and you know, they've really got their name out there. So yeah, I can't, I've not got a bad word really to say about Sabaton.
Where did you see them, Scott?
When?
Where? Oh,
Where? It
wow,
was the O2 Academy in Glasgow.
In Glasgow, aye. They've been there a few times, I think.
Yeah, well, they went through a stage. They played there every year for about 4 years, I think.
Right.
And then I went to see them live. I actually saw it was Sabaton and Accept.
Cool.
And yeah, and that was the first time I'd really got into Accept. And when I saw them live, I thought, these guys are awesome.
Aye, because I'm late on Accept as well, you know. So I think I've seen
I would
before.
like to see Accept, but Sabaton just didn't do anything for me after it. I didn't get it at all.
No,
it was, no, I don't know. I just whatever they're in mind, but I don't know.
I just think they get things right. You know, they come out with a solidly thought out album. You know, the whole package they bring with an album is spot on for me. You know what I mean? You don't think that you know, like they're subpar or
They don't
when
do
they
it
bring stuff out. I
half-hearted.
really get into what they're going for with the album.
They do it well. What they do well. I get what some people are saying. I think Greyman said something about them being boring. I kind of think I know where he's coming from. A lot of their stuff can sound similar in a way, but they're still different. But maybe to someone who's not as into them as like Scott and myself, they might think, well, their stuff all sounds the same. But for me, I like it all. Everything I've heard, you know, so it works for me. And they do it well. They don't.
Do you know what I like as well? They don't take, although they're talking about a serious subject, they're not a serious band. They don't take themselves too seriously.
They look
You know
like
what I
they're
mean?
good sense of humour and that kind of thing.
What's that?
I think they've all got a good sense of humour, you know.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they bring out an album about war heroes and war, and they've always got that kind of novelty song on their album. Like you've got Metal Ripper and you've got Metal Machine, and you know they kind of split themselves off a little bit from the serious side and show they've got that kind of, you know, although we talk about war, we're not just like down in the dumps all the time.
Aye, it's not all kind of doom and gloom kind of thing.
Exactly.
Sorry, Scott, I've got to jump in there. So you as at the very start of this video, you were telling us about this fantastic Judas Priest ranking video that you uploaded earlier today, which everybody should watch if you're a fan of this channel. You said in that video, and this shows I watched it, you didn't like it when songs had the word metal in it.
I know, and you know when I made that, I was thinking, no, I do like Metal Ripper, and I actually thought about the Sabaton ones, but I will make an exception with them because do you know what I was getting at with that? Is because metal bands kind of go out their way to write songs, like serious songs about metal, and try and add the word metal in.
I love that.
But Sabaton, those Metal Machine, Metal Ripper, they're all tongue-in-cheek novelty songs. So that's my
celebration of all things rock and metal.
Yeah, I mean the song Metal Machine is a song made up completely of bands. Heavy metal band names.
Or themes for their songs. There's a reference to 2 Minutes to Midnight, and then close. I think the words are something about being close to midnight, so I'm barking at the moon. You know, so
at the moon, yeah.
Right there, you know.
Yeah, and you've got like so you've got like one that's basically the lyrics are heavy metal band names, and one's heavy metal lyrics. from different heavy metal classic songs. So, Andy, you can just back off.
I'm not sure how.
Get me all riled up.
Wedding present. What's that one?
Piss off and listen to George Best.
I'm not sure if I've missed like the beginning of this conversation, which I probably have because I haven't been here for half of it. I'm doing like a Scott on the first episode. But did Andy not show an album not long ago where all the track titles were something heavy metal or heavy metal something?
Yeah, it was not a Japanese band.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah. Is that a no-go? Is that a no-go?
Never listened to that.
You know what's weird thing?
Put it away.
It's warped. Look at that. I'm going to send them a video to show how warped it is. But yeah, lots of heavy metal samurai, heavy metal chainsaw, heavy metal hunter. You loving this, Scott?
Sounds disgusting. Put it away. It's offensive. So you're definitely all about the happy metal, Bev.
More so, aye. I mean, I can take a moody song or a solemn song or, a ballad that's quite emotional or whatever. I do like the odd ballad, but I don't like ballads too often.
Because you have been dipping your toe into Metallica and Megadeth and stuff.
Yes, aye.
How's that going?
This was the last one. Well, actually, hang on. It's over here. I wondered if this might come up, so I'll put them out. This one, courtesy of Mr. D with a senior, I listened to last, and just before it, I had listened to this one. This one I prefer.
I knew you were going to say that.
Because it's less thrashy. To a hardcore thrash fan, they would say this is not really thrash in the true form, whereas these are more the traditional thrash, I think. However, on this one, I thought tracks 4, Welcome Home, Sanitarium, I thought Disposable Heroes was okay. Orion, the instrumental, was alright. And track 6, I think, and that's just a couple of listens. I think they were track 6 is Leppard Messiah, by the way. So I think on the first couple of listens, they're my favourites out of this. But I want to give it a few more listens, and I haven't listened to this one yet, but I have heard the song One because that was on Top of the Pops back in 1988. Once.
Yeah, that's not a happy song, Bev. That's certainly not a happy song.
And I remember it was on at the end of the programme, the credits were going up, and I remember getting up off the couch and looking at the telly and thinking, that's horrible. I was annoyed at the time, but that was a long time ago, so this one's still to come. So I'm going to do a kind of my thoughts kind of video on Metallica, and I've still got 2 Megadeth video sections to do. I've got about 4 Megadeth albums to analyse, and out of all the Megadeth albums, I've got about 8 or 9 of them now, and out of all the Megadeth, is that your favourite? Is it? The one I hate the most, or not hate, the one I dislike the most is Countdown to Extinction, which I think a lot of people like. But I find that the most depressing out of the Megadeths I've heard so far. It's just really, they must have everything in the minor keys or something again for that one. As it's just very, oh my god, I have to press stop here.
He having quite a heavy moment at that time, wasn't he?
Yeah. But I mean.
But saying that, you've got a thing with you've got like the happy 80s and the what's it, the sad 90s.
Aye, well, that was the thing for me. If I look back on my life from where I am now, if I look back to the 80s, everything is happy and colourful. And then the 90s was a stark contrast, and it was all grey and miserable.
I totally get that, because although well, I mean, look at me, I'm obviously about 10 or 15 years younger than all of you. apart from my hairline. But even for me, the music in the 90s was just absolutely dire. Like, you know, and growing up, like, because that, like, the 90s was my main period of, you know, going up through school and going into high school, and it was just absolute crap that was coming out.
I was at school, everything was all jolly and happy. And,
yeah. And I remember trying to listen to metal in the mid to late 90s, and it was all, you know, you had that massive industrial thing, and you had the kind of new metal, and I was just like, that is depressing. That and I quite like the industrial sound now, but at the time, I was just like, that just makes you want to kill yourself.
You should have got into the Weather Brothers, Scott. I was really upbeat.
Yeah.
The way to get through the 90s, really, to be honest, the easiest way to get through the 90s was to not listen to metal, as such, but alternative metal or alternative rock or whatever. That was how you got through the 90s. Because the metal was, I just thought it was shit. Pantera were just awful, and we all had to be grateful for, you know, some macho guys from Texas flying the flag for thrash. I don't think they've ever made a thrash song, have they? But they were heavier than everyone else at that time. So they got their place in history type of thing, and I've never understood that. Shane Ed were far superior, I thought. They kind of get slated, Shane Ed. I don't understand that either.
I think a lot of the bands from the 90s get slated though because nobody knew what the fuck they wanted to do. They're all like, well, we can't do what we did in the 80s because that'll get slated. We can't do something new because that'll get slated. So they're just like stuck in this like limbo of, right, we'll try and put this out and see what folk think. And then the majority of it folk thought, nah, you know, Spice Girls are big now.
The funny thing for me, knowing now, is at the time in the 90s, I thought metal had kind of gone away completely, but it actually stayed there in the background because everything else was, you know, grunge and alternative and indie and all these kind of things were coming before. But when you know, nowadays you find, Gamma Ray or whoever, for example, released a whole of the albums throughout the 90s and the 2000s, and many other bands did as well. So it was still there, but it just kind of vanished, if you like. And with me, it was an interest in music towards the mid-90s. I was really not interested. When I was trying to get into other types of music, Oasis were around. I latched onto them for a little while because of the guitar sound. It was a raw guitar sound they had, so I kind of liked Oasis. I had 2 Nirvana albums. I did own In Utero and Nevermind, but I don't anymore. I was trying to I had a Soundgarden CD single, Fell on Black Days. I didn't like Pearl Jam. I didn't like Eddie Vedder's voice. I know a lot of people love his voice. I just couldn't take to it. And I found them too miserable. So I was trying to get into other music, and it just wasn't working. I thought, no, it's just not the same as the 80s, and it just wasn't working for me.
And like you said, these bands were actually putting out good music. When you go back to these bands and you go back to their discographies, there's some cracking albums from the 90s, but nobody was wanting to even talk about them.
No.
I mean, obviously in the 80s you had like the magazines, and obviously the programs would have been really pushing these bands, and they were just forgotten about in the 90s. And that's not saying they weren't putting out good music, nobody knew they were putting out any music.
Yeah, the publicity wasn't quite the same, obviously, as well, which is kind of odd in a way, you know, because you would have thought as technology grew, things would only get better. But the internet didn't really kick in until the 2000s, I suppose, as well. But I remember buying a song by U2 in the 90s. It was, I wrote it down, I went and looked it up. it was the song called "The Last Night on Earth," and that was released by U2 in 1997, and that is the most recent thing I've ever had for U2, and it's kind of there's a bit of a dance groove to it, but there's a kind of heavy sounding guitar, and that's what attracted me to that song as well. And it's an okay song, but as a rule, I'm not even a U2 fan of a big scale, but I was just seeking that guitar magic that just didn't seem to be there in the 90s. Apart from the Crash Test Dummies, I thought they were unusual. Remember that song?
I get that song.
I got a copy of their album on a cassette tape, and I thought it was quite good. It was a bit different to everything else at the time, but it still just wasn't quite as amazing as what everything that came out of the 80s was. And so, of course, I think for me, gaming was coming out of the thing. So gaming, Sega Mega Drive, PlayStation, that filled a bit of a gap, the void that the music left for me. So
I was like that as well.
That took over. So, Sonic the Hedgehog, Lara Croft, they kind of got into my free time a bit more.
So, sorry, on you go.
No, that's fine. I think I was finished there, but go for it.
So moving into the 2000s and 2010s, and I notice you've shown a few. You seem to have your finger on the pulse a bit on some of the new wave of. I hate calling it new wave of traditional heavy metal. One, because we'll lose Mike completely. You'll just switch off. And two, it's 20 years since that kind of movement started, and so it's not new anymore. It lasted longer than the whole new wave of British heavy metal anyway. But new traditional metal bands, and you've done that recent video with promoting Kursk. So what are your favourite bands around that are out at the moment that are playing sort of the traditional metal?
Well, Kursk, obviously, I really like that. I've discovered them, but I like Fury. They are one of the new bands from Britain. So
they're more power metal, aren't they? They're more of a. They've got that. They're really good, really good. I saw them live.
They really are spot on. Like, they're definitely worth a listen for certain. And Forlorn Hope, that was thanks to Claudia that discovered these guys. They put out a really nice album. So that's as far as the British bands go, but there's new bands that seem to be cropping up all over the place. And I'm just trying to think of them all again. But, bands that are releasing new albums that have maybe been around for 5 to 10 years, I'm liking all that stuff. Freedom Call, they've been around for a while, but I've only just started hearing about them now. But Visions of Atlantis, this is more of the symphonic style as well. Serenity, another band. Temperance, another, they're kind of symphonic metal with female singers in them. They're all putting out brand new stuff, and I'm just finding all of this really good. And I'm just trying to think back to traditional metal. What is traditional metal these days? Is that, how Claudia just said the new wave of traditional heavy metal thing is about 20 years old. Is all the new stuff that's come out in the last 20 years, is it not being categorised, or is it harder to categorise it?
I don't know. I just don't think it fits into thrash, black, death, power.
Yeah,
it's just kind of, there's a lot of bands that will actually come out now and say, we are heavily influenced by Iron Maiden. Our music is Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, Accept, and what have you. I think those are the ones that kind of fit that traditional metal. And I think some of them are good for an album or two, but the same thing with the new wave of traditional thrash that people talk about. It's just, there's nowhere for these bands to go because they're so focused on this music they like. They're not going to evolve. Like, traditional metal evolved into thrash and power metal evolved, and everything evolved. But when you're so influenced by something in the past, you're not going to evolve because that's what you like. And that's nothing else about about it. So some of these thrash bands, I think they do a great album, but I'm not. Like Havoc is one, and people love Havoc. I've got one of the albums, and I kind of not. I love it, and I'm not kind of interested in finding anything else because I know it's going to sound very similar. And I may be wrong, but there are plenty of other bands out there like it. So I'd rather have one from a lot of bands than just have the same thing from one band. If that makes sense.
I think a lot of the time as well, when it comes to even like new wave of thrash, new wave of even like hair metal, it all seems really forced.
Yeah.
If it's not done right. Like when especially when I check out like these kind of new kind of hair metalish bands, it's not the same as the 80s because these guys had an attitude in the 80s. They didn't give a shit, and they're almost like getting this forced attitude over. Like these are how they acted in the 80s, so this is how we've got to act, and it's just and it's just like, oh, we've got to do this. When back in the 80s, it wasn't what's the word I'm looking for? It wasn't like a plan, like let's act like this. That's just the way they were. Like they were mental and they were heavy drinkers, and now it's like, oh yeah, we'll sing about Jack Daniels and we'll sing about drinking whiskey, but are you actually doing that? Probably not.
Well, some of them will be off to the gym probably nowadays.
Oh, exactly. They'll be straight edge.
Although not the wild limit, mind you, to be honest with you, I sometimes wonder if nowadays they'd get away with doing what the guys in the 80s got away with, because they seem to get away with a lot when you think about it in terms of the law and stuff like that, I suppose. So I don't know, but it's just not the same like that.
I think with a lot of the music that I listen to, it's a whole scene. Like talking about the Swedish death metal.
Mm-hmm.
Bands strive to sound just like the sort of first wave of those old school obviously they weren't called old school back then, they were just Swedish death metal, and they were renowned for I'm sure you've heard of it, the HM2 sort of buzzsaw guitar sound.
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole scene of bands that play like that. They're not wanting to evolve any further from that. It's just what you could, I suppose, say as a worship. And I think I love it. I absolutely love it. I know Mike sort of he likes it, but he's a bit on the fence about how good it is, and I understand that because they all sound very, very similar. The only thing that sometimes differentiates them is maybe the vocal style. But it is a whole scene, and bands do strive to go, right, we're going to play that old school Swedish death metal sound. The minute you plug your guitar into that HM2 pedal, you're only going to sound like 3 or 4 bands. There's nothing you can. There's a band called Gate Creeper. I know Darcy has picked it up, and they play that HM2, and they've kind of slowed it down and gone for a more doomier sound. But they're the kind of first band that have really pulled that off.
See, but when Entombed fetched out Wolverine Blues, they started off. They were one of the inventors of the sound that Mark's on about. Their first album is one of the things all these bands aim to try and emulate. And then on their third album, they decided to take that and make it a lot more palatable. And they decided to call it, somebody in the media called it Death and Roll, because it's almost like a rock and roll album with death metal as well. So it sounds very different from the first Entombed album. Now that for me, that was like, by the time they'd done that, 3 years into their career, I thought that's a fantastic move, because I'm starting already to be bored of that sound that you're on about, Mark. And I thought, what a great idea. They've mixed that up. That's going to keep my interest for another few years. And then nothing else, nobody else done it. Dismember done it to a lesser extent, but nobody else really followed that Wolverine Blues sound. And people call that Death and Roll, but there's really only that album that does it.
Funnily enough, that, and I've always thought this, and maybe it's just my opinion, but they talked about Entomb doing this death and roll, and it's quite right what they said. They were kind of mixing death metal, but putting sort of almost a rock and roll edge onto it. There was none of the fast sort of dubba 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 drums in it.
No.
But there was a band from Austria way before Entomb called Pungent Stench. Great name for a band, you know. I was well impressed with that.
That's funny you mentioned that, because I was going through Amazon this morning, and my wife said she was going through my want list on her phone, and she said some of these band names are so weird. Suicidal this and Suicide that and Death this, and I was like, and I was just looking through Amazon, just looking through albums, and I went, what about Pungent Stench? And she went, oh, they sound nice. So it's funny. It's funny you mentioned that, because that's what we were just talking about this morning.
How mad is that? Yeah, it's but they, from very early on, they were what I would class as playing that what we call the death and roll. It was death metal, but it had a real not a sort of popular sound. I can't call it that, but it was more palatable death metal, and it makes me wonder if Entombed maybe, you know, as they were playing that, they were thinking, quite, you know, we want to change our style a bit. It makes me wonder if they'd ever listened to Pungent Stench, and kind of Pungent Stench never got the glory for that, because, you know, have a listen to it, see what you think, but it's not got that HM2 sound that Wolverine Blues did, but the style of the music, you know, when I heard Wolverine Blues, and Wolverine Blues never had quite the same impact on me as it did for the likes of Mike and other people. I liked it, but I was a bit taken aback at the sort of direction they'd gone. And I think it was because that wasn't the first time I'd heard that style. I think it was for a lot of people, but I was already quite heavily into the underground scene at that time, you know, so it wasn't a massive shock to me. It was a bit like, I wonder why they've changed the style there, you know. It wasn't like, I didn't see it as them getting away from what they were doing. It was whether they were trying, you know, were they trying a more accessible route? You know, they'd called their album Wolverine Blues. In America, Marvel had granted them permission to use the actual Wolverine cartoon character on their album. I think Earache at the time was being taken over by Sony Music or Columbia Records, something like that. So it always reeked a little bit to me of Entomb kind of selling out. But madly enough, it is, a lot of people think it's Entomb's best album. Not me though, but you know.
It's very bad.
So check out Pungent Stench, Bev. Let me know what you think.
Yeah, do a review on that.
I don't know if he's happened to notice, you know how Vinyl Hazard has a contest going now, and he put a link to one of the tracks of the band's album you can win. Is it Wormwood or something like that, the band?
Yeah, Wormwood.
And I went and listened to that, and I was seeing in a later video how the music sounds amazing, really interesting and atmospheric, as you know, the atmospheric word says. But it was just the vocals for me that I couldn't grasp, because it's these obviously growly style vocals. And I was just thought, if they were clean vocals, I would probably be right all over it. But the music, really interesting stuff. So
what you should
I don't
do
know
is,
if they're anything like Pungent Stench, they're probably totally different.
what you should do is go and listen to Pungent Stench, then go back to Megadeth Countdown to Extinction. You'll think it's bloody amazing.
It'll sound wonderful.
Yeah, that's the way to get it. That's the way to start, you see, Bev. Listen to something crazy and then work your way back.
Yeah.
And, you know,
It sounds quite normal. Yeah.
I fear I may not be able to pull you over to the dark side as easily as I have with Scott, to be honest.
Oh, I'm there.
Well, maybe in about 30 years, perhaps.
I'll just have to keep sending you things, just so it can get a little bit heavier and heavier as it goes.
I used to own Metallica's Load as well, by the way. That was another album I picked up in the 90s. But I don't have that anymore. But yeah. I just remembered that now. Aye.
I don't think you're missing much with that one anyway. It's
Yeah.
it should have
Not
had
really
two words after the title, in my opinion. Load of, you know.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
question for
exactly.
you. It was something that we'd brushed on with Scott, and we're talking about. Well, all of us really were talking about how we sort of got into to the sort of rock and metal. I don't know if you've had this conversation while I was in and out of the proceedings, but how was it for you, Bev, when you were growing up? You know, because I've seen pictures that you've put on your personal Facebook when you were a young girl, and you've got the Def Leppard t-shirt on.
Yeah, as I was saying at the beginning, for the rocks, that it happened about 87, 88, and it was Hysteria, Europe's Out of This World, Bon Jovi, Slippery When Wet was out at the time, and I think Great White was another one, actually. They had, was it One Spittin', I think, was out round about that time. And these are basically the four bands, if you like, that kind of got me taking notice. And I say Van Halen, they were in the charts with a couple of tunes as well. So the guitar thing. Before that, it was my dad's record collection. My brother and I would just go through all that when we were in the early 80s, you know, we were about 6, 7, 8 getting into music. We'd sit there with our cassette recorders and record a mixtape off of dad's records. And he had things like Blondie and he had Big Country. That was a key one for me because one of their songs had this guitar sound I'd never heard before. And it was the song Chance, I think. And that really is one of the standout songs from the 80s that alerted me to kind of guitar music to go for that direction. And then, so, you know, as things go, and it was Kiss, that was another one, Crazy Nights, that was in the charts at the time, so they were another one at the time.
Was it something that just sort of personally interested you, or were you like myself and Mike? We were very sort of in a crowd of people, and we got into it as kind of a group of people. Scott was very much sort of got into the rock and metal on his own. His friends didn't like it. What was it like for you? Were you in a circle of people who
no? For me, I was on my own as well. Really, I didn't really have a big group of friends when I was young, to be honest. I was always kind of a loner. I had school pals, but never really outside of school did I do much. And the people at school anyway, none of them were into heavy metal and hard rock. And I just liked the guitar-driven music, you know. I was into that. That was what I was liking. So it was a journey kind of into metal myself. And a local radio station, Radio 4, they had a weekly rock and metal show. It was called Edinburgh Rock. And it was on every Saturday night from 7 till 10 at night. And it was 3 hours of rock and metal that was happening at the time. And I would tune into that on Saturday evenings, you know, and I would have the cassette tape ready to record and all the rest of it. And I would start getting into hearing about more bands through that, and plus the magazines as well. So that's kind of how it really developed for me. But I was really, my cousin was into the pop stuff that was in the charts, and the folk at school, they were on the pop stuff. And Bon Jovi was about as far as some of them would go, you know. But, so that was it. It was kind of my own journey, really.
So I take it you didn't get much gigs, or?
Not really. Certainly not in the metal scene. I think I saw Belinda Carlisle. That was my first concert, and I was 11 at the time. So Def Leppard came around that same year, but I didn't know that until they'd been and gone. I kind of missed it was a timing thing, but I don't know if I'd been allowed to go because rock and metal concerts are a wee bit less normal and calm, if you like, or a bit more rough, if you like. So I don't know if my dad said he probably would have taken me, but whatever. I just don't know.
Sorry, Bev, was that Def Leppard gig that you're talking about? I presume it would have been Edinburgh. Is that the one that's in that box set you got recently?
No.
Show in it?
No, they came to the Playhouse twice. They came in September '87 and April '88. And September '87 gig I have on a bootleg. That's called Sugar on the Rock. That actual show is on a bootleg. It's an audience recording. But the one that came out in the official box set that was released, that's from a 1980 gig down in England somewhere. It was Oxford, I think. Which was amazing because it was Steve material I'd never heard before. So yeah, and I've got that one from the Playhouse because it could have been the concert I was at or the one in '88, the next one. It would have been very similar to that, I guess. And the audience sounds amazing in it, you know. But that's, you know, I never got to a metal concert until the mid-90s. Bon Jovi came to Glasgow and I saw them on their I saw them on this tour, the These Days tour.
Who was with them, Bev?
Sorry?
Who was with them on that tour?
I know Skunk and Nancy were one of the supports, and I can't remember who else. But, Skunk and Nancy, you know, they were one of the kind of, were they
quite good, really, then.
I remember them. Yes, Skin had a great voice.
I remember the band, but I can't remember. There was two on the bill before, and I can't remember who the other one was. I think I wasn't interested in them anyway. But that Bon Jovi gig was pretty cool, and I was going to see them again, but I became ill at the time and didn't meet the gig or something. That was a whole other story. So yeah, I think that's about it as far as metal goes. And over the years, anxiety issues kicked in, and I just kind of went off the big crowd thing altogether. So that's how it goes.
So when did the collecting start then?
Recently, about 2 to 3 years ago, just before I kind of joined up with the vinyl community, I started collecting seriously probably about 2016. And it was CDs at first, because from, say, the late 90s through to about 2008, 2009, I would listen to music on my iPod or through the computer because I didn't have any hi-fi equipment at that point. But I did all my 80s stuff. And I got to the point where I'm fed up listening to things on headphones and this digital malarkey. I went and bought Iron Maiden's somewhere, what's it called? Matter of Life and Death. And, you know, I would burn it onto the computer. I had a Sony Vaio computer which had the disk drive in it. This Mac doesn't have it. So I'd burn them onto there and put them on my iPod. And no, I really want to have the whole hi-fi setup back again. And I would slowly but surely build up the CDs from about 2008, 9. And then it would increase. And I thought, one day, I want to have my hi-fi. I started seeing people in the vinyl community showing records, showing their room tours, you know, all this vintage equipment. I really want to have all that back. So, about 2000 and... what year is this? It was about 2017, probably.
What year is this now?
2017, I decided that I was getting the hi-fi equipment back, and I just started slowly picking up from where I left off at the end of the 80s. And from then, I only had a small amount of records because I switched to CDs very quickly at the end of the 80s. So I only had Bon Jovi and Def Leppard, some. Now that's what I call music compilations, and a couple of 12.
It's a hell of a collection you've built up over the last few years, and isn't it? Because I mean, people always sort of mention about the sort of wall of CDs I have behind me, but I've been buying them since they came out, and I've never kind of really stopped. I had a little period in the mid-90s when I didn't probably buy as many just because my band had split up and I kind of fell out with music a little bit. I was a bit fed up with it, but you know, it's over 30-year collection, so yours is a very impressive collection, really, since you've only been serious. Same as Mike. Mike's only kind of got collecting again more recently, and he's got a hell of a collection now as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's because
good question for these two guys here. How long have you guys?
For me, I'm about 3.5 years.
Jesus Christ, that's a hell of a collection for that amount of time, to be honest, isn't it?
Yeah, I just jumped in with both feet really. When I started collecting CDs, I was just kind of the same. I built up like a half decent for the time, and for obviously there's nobody around me that was collecting. I thought this is a pretty good collection, and I started buying. Well, I got this crappy little record player for, I think it was like a novelty gift for, I can't remember if it was for my birthday or for Christmas or something like that. But it was one that you basically just plugged in, and it had the wee knob that you turn on, and that's your volume as well. So I went and bought Number of the Beast, and I bought Screaming for Vengeance. So those were the first two records that kind of kicked it off again. And they sounded, well, for what I thought, they sounded amazing. I was like, oh, I've got this record player. And then I think I used it maybe 5 times, and I thought, no, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to get like a proper record player. So I bought a Audio Technica, and then that was really what properly kicked it off. And in fact, was it those 2 albums? It might not have been those 2 albums, but I think I had maybe about 30 albums, 30 LPs before I started making videos. And then once I started making videos, then it was just the gates of hell were opened. I've been skinning ever since. About 3.5 years properly. Like I always had CDs, but when I was growing up, it was more singles. So you if you heard a song, you would go and buy the single.
Mm-hmm.
Rarely would you go and buy a full album. And then I was really, by the end of '99, that's when I really started buying more albums, but it was more hip hop. I was more into that's when Eminem came out, Tupac. I was into Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg and all that kind of stuff. And then, obviously, sorry. I mean, it's not quite jazz fusion, but you know, and then that's what, because that's what really everyone at school and that were listening to. So that's what really you just kind of got into, and it was more like a natural thing rather than, oh, this is amazing. But when it finally came to like heavy metal, that's when I thought, right, I'm going to start collecting these CDs. I'm going to start picking up these albums. So yeah, so I had about 30 albums before I started making videos, and then it was just like, okay, I've finally found a group of people that can understand where I'm coming from, can show me new albums, and that's just when it all kind of really kicked off.
So you know, we were talking before, Bev, about your sort of fanatical, aren't you, really, about Steve Clark? Is there anyone?
You could see that. I'm obsessed.
Is there anyone up and coming that you think would be? I know you're probably never replacing, and you're not looking to replace him. But can you see somebody else that you sort of gravitate towards from bands?
Like the new generation, if you like, or newer. To be honest, I haven't really examined or analysed or looked at closely enough specific band members to really know or to really kind of think about that.
It's probably harder for a band or person now to make an impact on you like it did back then, though.
Aye, it is a little bit. It's, again, you know, what you lived through as a kid growing up, it's something that will never be repeated, I think. It's what, you know, it's been...
Completely agree with that. Yeah, absolutely.
But there's a load of good players out there, you know. I mean, I listened to some of the guitar parts on some of the new. I'm trying to think of the one I just heard recently. I think it was a YouTube video. I don't actually have the album, but this guitarist was just hitting the notes so fast and yet so clean. That's the thing. You've got to execute it cleanly. You can't muddy up the sound if you're playing a fast solo because it doesn't sound right to me. But
it wasn't that chap in Enchantment, was it? The guitar was an Enchantment.
Nah, it couldn't be him.
We've got a couple of questions here, but let's go to these from people that have asked. So
I know a couple there. Aye.
There's one from Daniel, Final Hazard.
Yeah, the guitar over here, it's an acoustic guitar, and I play guitar extremely badly, really badly, and I'm not in a band. I've never actually been in a band. I was, back in 1989, I probably wanted to be in a band, but not anymore. I've been to lessons on and off throughout the course of time, but I never stuck at it long enough, and I wasn't disciplined enough to get to a decent enough level, to be honest, to play anything decently. So if I could see a band apart from Def Leppard, who would it be? Iron Maiden, because they're kind of now my favourite band, I think, and I just think the whole performance, based on the last few tours, maybe not the last two, I don't know, they're probably still amazing, but they just seem full of energy, they deliver 100% show, and I just love the band. I love all their songs, apart from the songs.
Give it another try.
Well, it might grow on me, it could be a grower. What grails am I still after? Oh my God. Pretty Maids, Sin Decade, that's 1992. That's one of them. God. And I can't think.
I believe you're prepared for this video. It's terrible.
That's the thing when you ask these kind of questions. They'll be on my wants list on Discord if you want to. Just anything. Most of the grails now are just random things like, a Japanese Def Leppard single that I'm still after to complete the collection. Or, as I say, that Pretty Maids one, because it's quite hard to get. I've just landed the Blazing Stone recently. That was a grail. But everything, I'm just kind of really happy to get what I get when I get it. So I don't have any standout grails, if you like, at the moment. Apart from that.
Good way to be.
Sorry?
I'm talking about like grails and buying. Do you set yourself a budget at all, Bev, when you're buying?
It depends. The most expensive record I bought was that Def Leppard bootleg of the Playhouse gig in '87, and that was about £160 it cost me. Because I really wanted that, because it was from my hometown, it was smooth, and it's so hard to find. But I would not normally do that. I really didn't want to do that, and that's the only record I've ever paid a 3-figure sum for. For a grail, I would like to limit myself to £70 max. I would hope, depending on how desperate I was. But so, yeah.
I always find myself, I kind of think to myself, right, I've kind of got a bit of a budget, not so much for one-off items, because I think maybe it just shows what a dedicated sort of fan you are, that you're willing to pay that amount of money for one record by the band that you absolutely adore, and that's great. But I always find myself, I have like a budget that I'm going to spend. I think, right, that'll be it.
Mhm.
And I don't think I've ever stuck to it ever in my life. You know, I'll maybe justify it by saying, well, I didn't spend that much last month, so I could maybe just add a little bit on this month. And you know, I think it's the collector's curse. If you see something,
Absolutely.
and it's there, it's a bargain. You feel like I've got to have it.
Well, that's a bit like me. If I see something that I've been after, and maybe it's something that doesn't come up that often, I get this mentality in my head that I think, well, why should somebody else have it? I should have it. So I just think that's how I explain it to myself. Well, whoever's bidding against me, they don't deserve it more than me. I'm going to get it. And I'm sitting there with the record, and the electricity gets shut off. I'm eating beans. Can't afford my petrol to work.
Is that what you think, Scott, when you go to Vinyl Villains? Do you think Cloudy's not having that? I'm having it. Yeah.
I was like, Andy doesn't deserve that. That's going home with me. I can't afford it, but it's still coming home with me.
It used to be my shop.
Tough. It's our shop now.
It's one of the few better shops left. I just wish there was a few more, to be honest. They're all closing, unfortunately. But yeah. I've not seen Blind Guardian. Somebody asked me that. I've not seen them live. I would love to see them live. They would be amazing. Yes, you can ask. I can't really tell you because I've not really heard any of Blaze Bailey's solo stuff. I've not got his the albums that he's on for Iron Maiden.
Or you need to get virtually
You're saying Virtual Living's good, aren't you, Mike?
Yeah, it is.
Just recently you were singing at praises of it. I haven't heard the ones yet, or any of his solo works, so I'm not really sure. I think I'd like to check him out though.
I've not heard the stuff. I was a bit late to the party on Wolfsbane. I was really surprised how much I enjoyed hearing him on Wolfsbane. So the thing that's stopping me from checking out his solo stuff, I just haven't got around to it yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know why that's some solo works, but I'm just trying to see what else. Have I missed any questions here? But yeah. Another Grail's just come to my head as well. I would love an original pressing of Running Wild's Death or Glory. That's my favourite Running Wild album, so I would want an original from 1989. I think that album was released. I have the reissue, but I just, because it's a great album, I want a new. So that's another Grail. It's quite tricky to get in decent condition. A live album, I believe. That would have been interesting, I suppose, yeah. But a real live one and a real dead one, was that not the Blaze Bailey era? No.
No, I think that was Bruce. I would have liked to see Maiden do a live album after A Matter of Life and Death. It's the only album that they've not done recently that they've not done a live album with. And I love that album. I thought it would be great to hear those songs. And they never play any of the songs live, so it's kind of an opportunity. So, guys, it's what, 11 o'clock here? Are we
good to go?
How are we doing? Are we?
Is it my birthday yet? No, not yet.
Yeah.
Ages yet.
We want to stop before midnight mark, so we don't have to buy you a card or a present or anything.
Yeah, that's the way to do it. Make sure you cut the live stream off 2 minutes to.
Midnight.
Well, it's been good to have you on, Bev.
Yes, thanks for having me, guys. It's been a great chat and a great blather. A lot of fun.
It's been quite interesting to hear what you've had to say about stuff.
And a love-hate relationship with a certain band.
Well, I think we had to cover that.
We have to explore that, definitely. But there we go. You're getting some sympathy there, Mark.
Thank you very much, Gordon. Cheers, mate.
At least Gordon appreciates you, Mark. So,
yeah. I've had nothing in the post. I've had no little parcels come in the post or anything off anyone I know on this live stream. Just so you know.
And it's Sunday tomorrow, so you won't get any post anyway. So.
No, but it's
There we
nice.
go.
Thanks very much for joining us, Bev. It's really nice to see people. You know, you watch people's videos and you get to know people through that. But sometimes that nice little personal chatting, it's great. So thanks very much for your time.
I mean, thanks to everybody as well for watching and listening to my ramblings. And it's just nice to share your love of certain styles of music with other like-minded people. So, something I never got to do when I was at school. So here I am, 30 years later.
All right then. All right. So
that's what it's all about, isn't it?
Thank you all, and we'll be back with more of this in
everybody.
Thanks all. Thanks for watching.
Stay tuned.
Bye now.
See you later.